Hi, everyone. This is Jason Barack of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a first-time guest, but I found his videos really very entertaining. I didn't actually know the Daily Sheeple had a YouTube channel until a couple months ago. They've been a very popular website, aggregating content, having funny and very intelligent editorial pieces for a while. So our first-time guest today is a video producer at the Daily Sheeple, Joe Joseph. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, pleasure's all mine, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Now, Joe, for our listeners who aren't familiar with the Daily Sheeple, what do you guys do over there?
So, independent media site. We have a sister site, shtfplan.com. I'm sure you're familiar with that one as well. The Daily Sheeple is basically just that. It's an independent media aggregator. Plus, we have our very own content creators that really set out to give people a truly independent look and, editorial-based opinions on current events and perhaps even historical events. So I personally started about a little over a year ago at the Daily Sheeple. It's been around for quite some time. But, I've been there a little over a year. When I started, you're right, they didn't really have a YouTube channel. I think it only had like 1,000 subscribers. So over the past year, we've been able to get it up. I think it's close to 30,000 now. And really, it's been all organic, all just getting the word of mouth out. Plus, I hosted a radio show over at truthfrequencyradio.com, and I still do a broadcast every Friday night, Freaky Friday, at 7 p.m. Eastern over there, because everybody needs a little tinfoil hattery in their life. You got to have a little bit of tinfoil hattery. So that's Friday night, after a long week when really everybody talks politics and business and everything else. It's a time to let your hair down a little bit and just, let's talk about black goo and aliens, shall we? That kind of thing. So it's kind of broad-based. I like to dabble in a lot of things, and the Daily Sheeple was a good fit for me, so that's why I teamed up with them, and it's been a really good relationship thus far.
I've been following the Daily Sheeple and the SHTF website for years. I think it's a more funny than Drudge Report, and some of the I'd say it's more libertarian than Drudge Report, because Drudge Report is more conservative. But
right.
Yeah, there's a lot of humor there. I mean, I love your guys' logo, with the sheep in the suit. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, we try to keep it real. And the thing is sometimes people take a look at the Daily Sheeple and like, well, what is it, a satire site? No, it's not a satire site. But we're not that fear-based, fear-mongering site either. So the thing is we kind of tackle it from giving you the best, unbiased, independent news and information, but with a funny twist to it, too, because, when you get hit with constant negativity and fear all the time, it just gets old. It sours the mood, so...
Well, hit by fake news, the mainstream media says, we're the only source of truthful information, right? That's kind of how we've been fed for a long time. And I think that a lot of people really started to wake up the last couple of years. I woke up during the 2008 financial crisis, but more people started to wake up the last couple of years, especially during the recent election with Trump and Hillary. Yeah,
I've been noticing that it's peaks and valleys. It's like a roller coaster. That's the kind of how I look at it. My journey began right after Al Gore came out with An Inconvenient Truth. And so at that time, my family and I, we lived on Long Island up in New York, and cost of living there is through the roof. And so, I had another job. So I had my standard job, and then after that, I delivered cold cuts for Boar's Head, And so I'm driving home one day, and my wife calls me, and she says, hey, have you ever noticed up in the sky that grid pattern looks like tic-tac-toe? And I'm like, okay, what? Get out of here. Those are contrails. She goes, no, they're not. I said, yes, they are. No, they're not. They're chemtrails. What's a chemtrail? Uh-oh. Well, that one question was the rabbit hole that took me down subsequent rabbit holes, and that's kind of what launched my journey. It was about 2005, and boy, oh boy, what the thing that you come to learn when you start this stuff, and then as you kind of go on, is the more you know that you don't know. You know what I mean? It's just you open one door and it opens 100 others. And you're like, holy smoke, man, this is crazy. It's going to take some time to weed through. So, yeah, that was the extent of the wake-up call for me.
Yeah, everyone has different stories about their wake-up call.
Sure.
When they left the Matrix, when they got red-pilled, so to speak. But I want to talk about the U.S. now. Do you think the U.S. is the largest banana republic in Earth history because of the world reserve currency and all the other corruption in the global military empire?
Say that one more time.
Do you think the U.S. is the largest banana republic in Earth history because of the world reserve currency and all the corruption that's rampant now?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that we're a banana republic. Now, as far as the largest is concerned, in Earth's history, yeah, probably so by value. Even so, maybe not by advertised empire status, but the covert, the clandestine empire status. I mean, we've got our tentacles in everything. Now, for fiat currencies and things like that, I've got a kind of a different twist on that. And the twist is, while all of these currencies are fiat, we have to remember that everybody's doing it. So when I hear a lot of, and I'll say this, straight up fear mongering about, the market's going to crash. It's going to crash anytime now. It's coming. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Peaks and valleys, cycles happen in economics, but everybody's printing money. Everybody's doing the same thing. So really, the whole fiat currency thing, while, yeah, it's important that you diversify anything that you get into and make sure you hold at least a portion of whatever you have in tangible assets, you can't, that's the way the world works. The world works right now with a lot of paper. So that's kind of my spin on it, is that, yeah, will a crash happen? I'm sure eventually it will. But I wouldn't use fiat currency or fiat this to solely make any sort of decision on whether or not to invest in the stock market or to, diversify your portfolio or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the mistake that a lot of people made was they thought the crash was going to happen immediately after 2008, that the central banks were going to reflate, there was going to be hyperinflation, and gold and silver were going to go through the roof. So a lot of people, tried to get rich quick off that mindset. And so they put way too much of their own money into just gold and silver and mining shares. They weren't diversified at all. And, we're seeing the same type of mindset. And I think this is human nature, Joe. We're seeing that kind of in cryptocurrencies now, where people have sold a lot of their other investments or assets, especially gold and silver, and they've, tried to get rich quick in a lot of these different cryptocurrencies.
Isn't that interesting? How it's always get rich quick, that lottery kind of mindset. And the get rich quick people that are successful are few and far between, aren't they? I mean, it is really any sort of endeavor that you embark on, especially, by yourself or an entrepreneurial effort, takes a tremendous amount of energy, effort, and, to be quite honest, failure, because there are very few people that go, and you can even talk to some of the most successful people out there. They will tell you that they've failed many more times than they've succeeded, and it's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort. And you can't look at failure, of course, like something that's going to deter you from moving forward. You have to learn from that. That's a learning experience. And the get rich thing is just the get rich quick thing is just, it's very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. So yeah, while some people might catch lightning in a bottle, and some people did with Bitcoin. If you look at Bitcoin, and its meteoric rise, yeah, if you were one of those lucky few that actually held on to the Bitcoins that you invested when you were $1, they were $1 or $2 or $10 or whatever, man, I mean, you're doing really well, but if you're somebody that said, oh, hey, man, this is great. Now I'm going to buy for 15,000 a Bitcoin and, I'm in it now. Hoorah. Well,
you've already lost 5,000. So
you missed the bus. Yeah.
And you might panic and sell, and then 6 months or a year from now it could be higher than what you paid for it. But the volatility, a lot of people are not going to be able to handle the volatility that it's going to have going forward. I mean, Bitcoin, It could easily have a $1,000 coin swings every hour going forward.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, that's the thing, and people have become accustomed to all of the protections and the fail safes that are built into the markets. Whereas if it drops but a certain percentage, they shut down. But Bitcoin doesn't do that. It's go, go, go. Wherever it's going, it's going. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. One thing that's interesting though, and it's something that I think when you get into this stuff, you really have to have this as your mindset. If you're going into this to, get money because you think money is going to make you happy, you're totally and completely wrong in that. It's delusional. Money doesn't make anybody happy. As a matter of fact, it's funny because people who love money are never satisfied with money. They always want more, more, more. Look at Jeff Bezos, $111 billion, and this guy is going like there's no tomorrow, So if you go into it with a good mindset where money's really not the driver, let's say your driver is, you want to be prosperous, you want to be make sure your family's taken care of or you're taken care of. That's great. But if you're looking to get rich quick, all that kind of stuff, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And then when you get there, it's like, okay, now I'm here. What do I do? I got all this money, and it just ends up not satisfying.
I think that's a very important distinction that you made. For a lot of entrepreneurs, their goal is to get rich, but their main goal should not be to get rich. Their main goal should be to provide a valuable product or service to society.
Yes.
And then getting rich will be the effect of that.
Right. That's the effect. Exactly right. But that can't be the driver. You're absolutely right. Like with your mission statement. Your mission statement can't be, I love money, get rich. That's never going to work, Right, but if it is like you just said, hey, these widgets that I have produced, that I'm putting out there, are the highest quality widgets. I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and I'm going out there, and these are the best out there, and I put my name behind it. And you're successful. It's like people who do good work, the work finds you. That's the thing. If you do good work, work will follow you. And the same thing with a product or a service. Those things that you provide, if they're good, it will get out there and get around, And of course, it's up to you too to make sure that you drive it and have a good, marketing plan and a way forward. So, yeah, that's the biggest thing I would have to say is that, and you don't want to go in there with that being the focus. You want to go in there with being that success and that quality is there. And if the success and the quality is there, you've got a good work ethic, you've got a good communication, you communicate well with others, you'll do wonderful, but you got to put that work in. It's not get rich quick for sure.
And speaking of, providing value as entrepreneurs, and you laid out some of the path to that, these social media companies, they initially start off as small, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, the Googles, they were tiny companies, and they actually were providing value to society. And the larger they got and the more profitable they've got, they basically become, Rockefeller type of social engineering, basically monopolists at this point. They basically have monopolists because I think I read that Facebook, Google, and YouTube combined own 99% of all the online advertising revenues. Just an insane amount.
That's nuts.
Yes, it's a straight up monopoly. They have, all these patents and intellectual property basically blocking any competition. And now they're implementing their censorship and their demonetization on people like you and me. It's
sure. Now, interestingly enough, Started to see this way back, again, probably about 2006, 2007 with YouTube and eBay. eBay was another one, another big one that really had its tentacles out there everywhere. And every time a startup would come around, they'd scoop them up before they got too big, or if they started to get successful, they would do that. PayPal, another big one. Any sort of payment processor that came even remotely close to threatening them, they'd buy them up and shut it off. And PayPal was the only one in town. There was a website called PayPal Sucks. Because they did. I mean, it was awful. You'd start up a business, and my wife and I have some experience here because we're starting up online business ourselves right now, and we did this years ago. My wife would sell vintage Bath and Body Works on eBay, and of course you have to have a PayPal account and things like that. Well, you start making money, and then they start to question. They'll freeze everything. They freeze all your assets, and then they say, well, we need to verify your identity. So what we need is your driver's license. We need a copy of a utility statement. And then this is what really burned us. They wanted to see invoices of our inventory, how we've gone about getting our inventory and things like that. That's none of your business. Why do you need to know where I'm getting my inventory from?
Yeah, it's very invasive.
And so that was extremely invasive, and we didn't want to play ball. And a lot of people didn't want to play ball. And as a result, you had merchants, online merchants that, basically had all of their assets seized. They couldn't pay their mortgage, couldn't pay their bills. Houses were foreclosed on and things like that. Where they had hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up, and so.
Well, there's competition now. There's Shopify. So maybe with their stupidity, their attempt to have too much control, be a monopoly, basically, they've allowed for competition who are not willing to do that. Companies like Shopify and stuff.
So like I said at the beginning of the broadcast, there's always a workaround, right? Humanity is great for that because prohibition never once has ever worked. Anytime you try to prohibit humanity from doing anything, we are like a 6-year-old, humanity on the whole. We totally rebel, we throw a tantrum, and we find a workaround. And by God, there is every time a workaround. When alcohol prohibition came around, there was a workaround. Marijuana prohibition comes around, there's a workaround. The war on drugs has failed. Like you just said, with censorship, Facebook. Okay, we're gonna go ahead now. Used to be an awesome social media tool. When you could reach all of your friends on Facebook with one post and it reached everyone, it was an amazing tool. And then they started to restrict that, and they started to incorporate all these fancy algorithms. AI hit the street, and it was able to manage a lot more than all of their monitors ever could. And so, they really started to clamp down, but they've gone too far, and they've pissed people off to the point now where you're going to start to see a lot of blowback as a result of this. And I, for one, am happy that it's coming. It's funny that you have tech giants like your Facebook, your Googles, your Twitters. You would think with all of that collective intelligence that they would see it coming. But they seem to be blinded by.
I don't think they care. I think
they're immortal. Yeah.
And they think they have the politicians in their pockets. So.
Yeah, but I think that's they're really miscalculating here.
Completely agree.
They've pushed it to the point. Now here's the thing: I don't like how they're framing this, though. I don't like how the control freaks are framing it and everything else. And the way they're framing it is, well, the social media giants are the ones that allow all of this fake news and all of this polarization to happen. Well, what we need is regulation. We need to go in there and regulate what it is that people are able to post and all this, because we don't want all of this unrest and all of this divisiveness and everything else. So I almost feel like what's coming down the pipe is going to be something that helps prop up the mainstream media or their traditional mouthpiece their propaganda mouthpiece, their Operation Mockingbird mouthpiece to, because right now they're dying. They're dying fast because people don't trust them anymore. And that's why they go to the internet. That's why they go to channels like yours, is because they want to get real information from real people, not an actor or an actress that sell their souls for pennies on the dollar, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, I would like to see, as a solution to breaking up these big technology, social media monopolies, instead of basically turning them into utilities and governments regulating them, that would not solve things, in my opinion. I think things would be like what you said. I would say let's start pulling their patents. Let's take away their patents. Let's take away their monopolies, because
make everything open source.
Yes, and so basically then I would think, or make their patents expire, and I think even if they don't do that, I think they pissed off so many quality content creators, either demonetization or removing channels. 5 years from now, there's going to be probably a dozen different direct video upload websites that are going to start taking away market share of YouTube. Because like you were telling me how much your channel has been censored. Your channel was growing at 3,000 subscribers per month without spending any money on advertising. And you told me some months that went down to 0. That's just insane.
Yeah, it was. We were growing at about 3,000 a month. Then they changed the AI. They changed the way the algorithm worked. And we went from about 3,000 a month down to about 500 a month. And it took me a while to decipher basically how the AI was doing its thing and to work around it. Now, I got it back up to where I was, but that took almost 8 months, you know, to get it back up there and figure out how the AI worked and what it was doing. So now that I got that, you know, I'm back to where I was, but that's 8 months of lost productivity. And what did they do? Probably changed a couple lines of code, and that's about it. That's the issue. Now, I know that there's a competitor now that's gaining a lot of traction, and I think it's called DTube. And so I know a friend of mine is right now setting up a Daily Sheeple channel over there, and I'm going to give it a shot to see how that works. And if I remember right, and I'm just learning about this now, I just found out about it yesterday, that is tied to a Steemit account, and then, you know, you can actually be compensated via cryptocurrency. So that's kind of interesting too.
The big technology social media companies, Joe, hate DTube so much that it's blocked in all the search engines. So I searched for it on DuckDuckGo and a couple others, and I could only find it through Steemit posts.
Is that right?
Yeah, so they blocked it for like 3 pages. I went through 3 different pages on different search engines, and it was blocked.
Holy moly. Yeah, so but see, that's the thing. Now you know, wow, they really don't like that. So now that's what evokes the 6-year-old in humanity. See, they don't like it? Okay, we have to do it then. You know, so.
And there's also, you know, content creators that were making a good living. I've had friends who were making like a pretty solid living off creating content a lot, and they're without any warning. There was no, you know, formal email or warning from YouTube or Google telling them that we're going to reduce your ad revenues, that just had like 99% of their ad revenues removed.
Now, I have to tell you, that seems to me to be quite calculated, because it almost looks as though, and I know people too. One of my dear friends, his YouTube channel's changed the channel. Kenneth Webb. He has, you know, 130,000 subscribers, and he was one of those individuals that basically lost everything because he was making a very good living just doing his video content. And they pulled the rug right out from underneath him. And you try to look for reasons why. There was no copyright strikes. There's nothing like that. It's just that subtle change in the algorithm or change in their community guidelines or whatever it was, you know, totally throttled him and so many others back, and have really put a lot of people in a tough spot or even ruined them. And I look at it, and it reminds me of a lot of times in history where this has happened, just in recent history. You know, you talk about 2008 being your awakening, but it was an awakening for a lot of people during that time. And if you remember, The Ron Paul revolution started right around 2006, 2007 as a response to the Bush administration and a lot of the issues going on from there. Yeah, I remember when Obama got elected, there was a lot of people that said, "Oh, thank God, man, it can't get any worse than Bush." Oh boy,
be careful what you wish for, right?
Holy man, I'll tell you what. And so the Ron Paul revolution was kind of a response to that. Now, during that time, right about the time of the crash, or maybe right before it, there was a march on Washington where there was 1 million people that marched on Washington, to the point where, and it happened right after the crash because Obama was president and he flew his helicopter right over the crowd, and you got to wonder, a lot of people said, "Oh, you must have been crapping his pants when that happened." No, he doesn't care. He didn't lose a wink of sleep over it. But what happened after that was very interesting. Once they saw that this new thing called the Tea Party had started to rise up, you had these new organizations join and align with the Tea Party, organizations like Freedom Works and other entities that at their helm, and I can't remember the guy's name, are established members of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, and they are, for lack of a better term, as globalists are. And they co-opted the Tea Party and totally derailed it off of what it originally was and what its intent was.
And then Obama had the IRS attack the Tea Party too, to try to get the list of the donors' names, in addition to trying to removing their tax exempt status and auditing them. It was basically ruining those organizations.
Yeah, and so that's why when I look at things like Bitcoin and I look at the ownership concentration and things like that, it makes me apprehensive, because of all of the times I've seen anything that comes out that's truly beneficial for our population, for humanity, for whatever purpose, when it's truly beneficial, they come in and they co-opt it. And the only thing I can tell you as far as cryptocurrency is, and why I think it's going to survive and be safe and here for a long time to come, is because of how many there are out there. I think it's impossible for them to be able to co-op every one. You could got gun coin, pot coin, Litecoin, all sorts of stuff out there. These things, because so many people have taken it upon themselves to free themselves from the matrix, I don't think they're going to be able to overcome that.
We'll be right back with Joe Joseph after a word from our sponsor.
Do you work out routinely and eat healthy almost all the time? If you eat paleo or vegan or work out routinely, you may be eligible to save up to 33% off on your life insurance thanks to Health IQ. Health IQ is a venture capital-backed, big data technology life insurance company that offers customers life insurance at special rates by using the latest technologies. For more information, please go to healthiq.com/WS4MS. That's healthiq.com/WS4MS. We were discussing this before we started recording. So you said that you're neither pro-cryptocurrency nor anti-cryptocurrency. I think that's a good place to be. I think it's part of a valid diversification tool, because if you own some physical gold and silver, you have some cash in case there's a stock market crash, you should also own some cryptocurrency, maybe not just one, maybe a couple, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, maybe some Ethereum, and a couple other different cryptocurrencies. But I think the one common theme, though, Joe, is that, we live in a really unfair world now. And really, since the 2008 financial crisis, I don't remember prior to the 2008 financial crisis things being this bad. And you talked about the people with the pitchforks. The rules have been changed. Right. And a ridiculously unfair amount of times since the 2008 financial crisis. Anytime, someone's about to go bankrupt who's politically connected in the right place or very rich, or in the right, or a Democrat that committed a felony, the stuff we're seeing now with the FISA warrants, the unmasking, the corruption in the FBI and the DOJ. These people who in the past 20 or 30 years ago, they would have gone to prison. Basically no questions asked. Either political party, they're getting basically not even charged.
That's right. And people are getting pissed. The issue that you have here in America and really in Western civilization is attention span. When it all comes down to it, people have been flooded with so much information so fast that the 72-hour news cycle is basically people's attention span. If you're lucky enough to have something survive the 72-hour news cycle, then it might gain a little bit of traction. But so many people get flooded with so many things so fast, and there's one crisis after another, that we become desensitized to it, and that's the issue that we have today, is that people have become so desensitized to everything that it creates an unbelievable apathy that it's hard to overcome,
Yeah.
And
I think the mainstream media and Twitter have led to this somewhat. I mean, people still we still don't have answers or videotapes of the shooter from the Las Vegas shooting from October. So there's tons of unanswered questions. We should be calling the FBI and the Las Vegas police to task for not having the information out already, because look at all the other crimes and terrorist acts that have happened since then, and they have all this information.
Sure. And, the other thing is, too, and this is very important, and we got to look back at history for this as well. We have become an unbelievably selfish and self-centered society. We really have. And we were engineered that way. The 20th century brought that about, and it was brought about on purpose. There's a great documentary that I would recommend all of the people listening to take the time to watch. And it's you can watch it on YouTube for free. It's called The Century of the Self. And it gets into how we came from an agrarian needs-based society to your desires-based urban society, how that's all kind of come about, and the control structure and how it's been made. And a guy that was pivotal in creating that, as a matter of fact, I call him basically the guy that destroyed Western civilization, is Edward Bernays. I mean, that guy was pivotal at completely changing the social fabric of our society, demoralizing it, devaluing everything, virtues, values out the door. That guy was one of the pivotal people, especially in the 1920s, that brought this about. And there's a great example of how he brought these kind of things about and the tools that he used to do it. And you can probably hear him talk about it himself, but back in the 1920s, the American Tobacco Company they wanted to boost their sales of cigarettes because they felt that at that time they were losing out on half the market. And a lot of people don't know that at the turn of the 20th century, women didn't smoke because it was considered not ladylike and phallic. And so women were basically forbidden to smoke. And of course, the early 20th century, 1920s, were huge for the women's suffrage movement. So American Tobacco comes to Edward Bernays, and this is right around the time when he started this new concept called public relations. And they come to him and say, "Hey, Eddie, what can you do for us?" And so Eddie decides, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and call some of my debutante friends that I party with from time to time, and I've got this great idea that we can tie women's suffrage to this too." So he makes some phone calls and tells them the plan, and then the next day he goes and he calls all of the major newspapers that basically feed all your local newspapers and your local news apparatuses, the news wires. So the New York Times at that time was a major publication, and he got them to cover this parade that was happening down 35, I think it was Broadway or whatever. And so they have this parade, and these debutantes are marching down the street, and at this assigned time, they pull out their torches of freedom. which happened to be a cigarette. And everybody's blown away by it. Oh, what are these ladies doing? Oh my God, but that's what it was. It was their torches of freedom in defiance of, the control that men had on everything and in support of women's suffrage. And wouldn't you know it, women across America started to pick up their torches of freedom in support of women's suffrage, and cigarette sales surged. All because of that, as did lung cancer and all this other crap too. But yeah, hey, it made good money. So when you look at, it's so pivotal to understand how we're controlled. Another great book, if anybody wants to understand how we work as far as how humans work in a crowd, is a book called The Crowd by Gustav Le Bon. He was a psychoanalyst in the 19th century, and he basically was the guy that unlocked how humans and their behavior changes between being an individual and then being part of a crowd. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be part of a physical crowd, but a group that you associate with. And when you associate yourself with things like, let's say, for example, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. When you do that, you put yourself in a box. And you may not think you do, but you do, because you're now associating with this organization. You identify with it. You're tying your personal identity to this group. And that comes with what? Rules, bylaws, things like that restrict you or restrict your thought. And that's so pivotal, if you ask me. This is how I live my life, to not associate yourself or align yourself with those kinds of groups. Don't let those groups define who you are. And if you can do that, then you can certainly remain objective and operate outside of the matrix, outside of this construct. You're not able to do that if you're tied down and boxed in by a lot of this groupthink and group mentality. And that's unfortunately also a product of that 20th century social engineering that took place, is that we lost our individuality. And that's something that we really have to work hard to recapture, because I don't think we're going to be able to break free of this until we figure that out as humanity, or at least as like as a nation.
That sounds like an interesting documentary and some interesting books. I'm going to definitely check that out later. Some of the people I think that were pivotal in basically for crafting how things have changed, and I think it's basically been 100 years, like you said, are people like John Maynard Keynes.
Big time.
Keynesian economics was basically like, well, consumption, you can overconsume rather than save and invest and be frugal, live within your means. And so overconsumption was looked at like crazy amounts of debt and deficit spending, even by individuals, was looked at as good for the economy. Yep. You got people like Antonio Gramsci that wanted to basically brainwash kids in government schools starting at a young age. And that was his goal, put basically leftists and Marxists into Hollywood, into all of culture.
Oh, yeah.
Media.
As a matter of fact, he was exposed, along with many others, by the Reese Committee. If you take a look at the Reese Committee of the 1950s, that committee was tasked with just that. They found that the endowments, the Guggenheims, the Ford, the Rockefeller Foundations, the Carnegie Foundations were all colluding with each other to bring about that communist blueprint in our education system, to turn it from an education system to an indoctrination system. See, because before your standard brick and mortar public schools, the Rockefeller designed public schools, you had one-room schoolhouses where basically people's education was an individualized thing. You had one teacher and you had a bunch of grades, everybody all together, and she was basically a proctor, and kids were self-taught. And was the natural way humans learned basically since we started. And then all of a sudden,
were homeschooled.
Yeah, basically, and then we went off the rails. and instead of an education system, you now have an indoctrination system.
And instead, in the past, Americans were a lot better at math and science. Their test scores were much higher than they are now. And so people of the past knew economics at a younger age, like sound economics. There was more independent thinking, more entrepreneurship. And, now I think a lot of the government schools, especially like the elementary school level and junior high and stuff, like these are basically like they're teaching kids to think like the government's gonna do all this stuff for you. You have to think collectively what's good for society and what's good for the government first. And so, there's not a lot of independent thinking. Like there's no basic, even in university level, when I was there, I mean, raising my hand and challenging the professor on something was like looked at like you're a black sheep.
Well, of course, because we could get into that. That's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. The interesting thing is, they want people just smart enough to operate the machines, but dumb enough to ask questions. They don't want people asking questions. They just want you to do your job, be a good drone. And that's what public schools were designed to do. In 1953, when the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare came about, the United States was by far and away the #1 country in the world in math and science and in reading and literacy, And today, we are 40th in the world in science. We are 25th in the world in math. We are 24th in the world in literacy. So public education has failed. And why on earth would we put millions and billions and dollars into a failed system? We wouldn't do it at home, right?
Yep.
So why would we do it on a whole?
Because of waste and corruption,
yes.
Basically entropy. So you have the case where the Department of Energy says, we can fix these problems. We just need more resources. The state of New Jersey is known for enormous amounts of corruption in their educational system. I think they've spent the most money per capita per kid in the classroom, and their test scores are still going down. But the teachers unions have an enormous pension fund plan, even though I think it's underfunded. And I've seen documentaries about this where, a lot of the managers in the teachers unions are driving brand new Mercedes Benzes that they trade in every year.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not knocking teachers. Don't get me wrong. A lot of times their hands are tied as far as teaching to tests. Of course, now with No Child Left Behind or whatever's now followed that. There are these standardized tests that these schools have to pass in order to maintain their federal funding status. And the teachers now teach to the test. So these kids are not getting anything that they're going to use when they graduate. Here's a good question for you, Jason. If you were to provide a percentage, how much of your education, we'll just use high school education, how much of your high school education do you actually utilize in your real everyday life?
Less than 20%, I would say.
Yeah,
and
probably
for college,
so.
It might even be less.
Yeah, probably so, right? What a waste of time. What a waste of time and energy, because the majority of the things that we do and use in our everyday life now are things that we learned via life experience, on the job training, OJT, stuff like that, teaching yourself. It is not what you learn in a brick and mortar classroom. It is a complete and total waste of time. So imagine if we allowed children to develop naturally. Think about how many Einsteins or Teslas have we done away with, have we snuffed out because they were bored in class and didn't get good grades, or they acted out and they were just put on pills.
Well, Einstein actually did. That's funny you bring him up. He actually did really bad in school, and they actually thought he was mentally disabled because of he had learning disabilities in school. He was so smart, and he excelled at a few certain things that he just did not fit well in the classroom. But you brought up, teaching to the test. The other thing is, we have scandals. There are scandals all over the United States now where teachers have been filling in grades to improve so they get their bonus.
Right.
So this is not only is there waste, fraud, and corruption, and we could talk about this in so many different government industries and agencies where the government has gone into, but it's created perverse incentives by teaching to the test where the teachers now are willing to erase student answers and fill it in and not answer every question correctly, but make it better by just enough so they get their bonus.
Right, because again, self-centered selfishness is what is the driver of these people, because we have shifted to that. Well, I can't pay for my Mercedes if they don't pass that. I need that bonus. I'll do whatever it takes, even to the detriment of the children.
And the even worse scandal, and no one is talking about this, and I'm not sure if we should talk about this since the sponsors may get angry with me, but you know what? It's the truth, is that there's an explosion now in women teachers at the high school level, women who are married or single, 20-somethings or 30, who are having sex with, 15 to 17 years old. I see two of them. I see almost one a day now on the news.
Was it us, or was it not just reported when we were going to school? Because I can't. What on earth is causing this explosion? It's crazy. I don't think I ever remember a story about that, or even hearing anything close to that when I was going to school. I just don't remember that. I mean, it was so rare of an event.
Yeah. I mean, it was not like almost one a day around the United States.
Right.
I'm sure it did happen, but maybe it was maybe like
few and far between, right?
Few and far between. It was not pervasive like it is now.
Yeah, and I wonder if that doesn't have to do more with the pornography is just absolutely flooded our society. And I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with that. I'm no expert when it comes to it, but I can tell you that our society is much more demoralized than it's ever been. As far as I can, I mean, you go back to the Wild West, I think people had more manners and more respect for each other, at least, and we just don't anymore. We don't have manners. We don't show respect for each other. And
I think Joe, it's more about how feminism has morphed into it.
Sure,
so like women are the ones who cheat. The higher percentage now, I think, in the United States is that women cheat more than men. Women filed for divorce more than men.
Yeah.
Women around here in the DC metro area, in a lot of cities, it's the women who are dating like a bunch of different men at once now, rather than the normal stereotype is that men are the players and men date multiple women at once.
Because remember too that we also had the majority, of the jobs and everything else, and women do now have more of a presence in the workplace. So I can see how that might flip flop a little bit. But good grief, I mean, you're right. It is rampant, no doubt.
Yeah, it's just the moral decay. I call it moral decay, moral bankruptcy, and men are bad too. So I don't want to pick on just women. I think there's a lot of bad men in the culture. I think in general the moral compass of most people now, especially Americans, has pretty much degraded compared to past generations.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And again, that's not to say, well, back in my day. No, it's not like that. It's just it has to do with I think the ability to spread information. I think the internet, while there's so many good things about what it's done for humanity, especially with regards to how we communicate with each other, just an unbelievable renaissance and revolution there. But on the flip side, it's also given way to a dark web and a dark net that allows for some very shady things to happen,
It's also created a bunch of new problems, though, and made things a lot more complicated. I mean, like, I'm single right now, and so, like, smartphone dating, even 10 years ago when I graduated college, there was no real smartphones. There was only regular cell phones, so you'd have to get a phone number, send a text message. Once these smartphones with the iPhone and all these other smartphones exploded and all these dating apps, I mean, it's just the dating has gone so much more complicated and crazy and difficult and out of hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's only going to get it's going to get worse to a certain point, and then the implants come around and the wearable clothes with the computers in it and augmented reality, and eventually
or the sex robots now that are on sale at the Consumer Electronics Show for like $10,000 or $12,000 for a base model. I mean, it's just getting. Yeah. I just saw Blade Runner a couple nights ago, so the sequel Blade Runner, which has some of that stuff in there. It talks about a dystopian future. I mean, I think we are unfortunately headed towards a dystopian future. So in the last couple of minutes of the episode today, and obviously I really enjoyed this discussion,
Same
so we'll
here,
try to have you back.
Yeah.
But how would you have reviewed how would you summarize 2017 in a couple sentences? Maybe?
Train wreck. 2 words. Train wreck. Absolute bomb. You know, life-wise too. I mean, 2017 was just one of those years that I hope. We'll put it this way, I will forget 2017. Yuck on 2017. Now, 2018 though, I see a lot of, well, at least in my life, I'm looking at it as tremendous opportunity. And going forward, you never know. See, this is the thing. I suck at predicting what's going to happen. So I like to just kind of speculate a little bit. And some of the things that I see that concern me are over in China. They're doing some very controversial scientific experiments with regards to cloning. It looks like they just cloned some chimpanzees and they're doing humans next. What does that mean for humanity? I don't know, but I can tell you when you start to play God, very bad things happen. Also over in China, they are making tremendous waves with regards to quantum encryption, quantum communications, and they also have a tabletop laser that they're designing that can do a 100 petawatt burst that can rip the fabric of space. Now, if you ask me, just like CERN, I'm very concerned about CERN. That thing makes CERN look like a pop gun. And I have this thing about ripping through the veil and opening doorways we probably shouldn't. Very bad things can happen. And that's so that's some of the things that I like to look at and I watch. And where I find that is in a lot of the university peer-reviewed material out there, a lot of the cutting-edge reports coming from these scientific experiments. So in that regard, yeah, science, they're really pushing the envelope there. Economy-wise, you know, they always say, this year's the year it's going to crash, it's going to burn, and it never really does. Back in 2008, it did. I don't know, Jason, if we're due for one, but I can tell you, I just pay attention and do the best job I can. I really, when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's so volatile. I never know what's going to happen, and the corruption's so rampant. It just seems to me so very hard to predict. You know,
the only reason we haven't had a crash since 2008 is because they've literally changed the rules all the time. They've kept moving the goalposts. It's kind of like how, you know, Lucy pulls the football out from Charlie Brown. It's like that all the time.
Right.
And they've literally printed tens of trillions of dollars. And it's not just the U.S. It's China doing it. Europe's doing it. Japan's doing it. They're basically working. A number of these governments are working with each other, coordinating things. So that's how they've prevented the crash, is they're working with each other. One of my sources, Nomi Prinz, who has a new book out soon called Collusion with the Central Bankers, she says they're literally talking every day on the phone to try to manipulate markets and make sure that so if European banks like Deutsche Bank or some of these other ones are about to collapse, you know, they change the rules, they come in there and buy the stock so it doesn't go to zero, you know, they delay bankruptcy. So they're doing all these things. That's what's not fair about the process. And so, you know, the average person, if you have money in your 401k or your IRA, your retirement money is going up. But, you know, in actuality, the money is being stolen from you by the government with inflation.
Right. Yeah. So that's a toughie for me. And then for foreign policy, you know, I always look at that, and wars are ends that justify the means. They seem to be the things that drive. If they want society to do something, they typically have a war or a conflict to get to that way, you know, the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, and I think Trump's basically a neocon at this point with the stuff he's been doing with the amount of drone strikes in Syria. And I think the U.S. is in a proxy war now with Turkey, a NATO ally. So it's ridiculous. Yep.
So I don't think you're going to see much change on that front. I think we're going to continue to see just more of the same.
And I think he's moved like some of our stealth bombers over to Guam.
Yeah,
so
why not?
Like, for North Korea, right? So there's a potential for a strike there. So I mean, it's just the amount of stuff going on is crazy, and yet, you know, in spite of all this, the stock market's basically gone parabolic the last 12 months, and And, if you didn't read any of our news content, you would think that, because the stock market's doing well and Trump got the tax cuts, that things are improving a lot.
Yeah, I find it extremely arrogant of the control freaks to think that they can just go ahead and do all of these things that threaten the well-being of humanity and think that they're going to get away with it. Because I got to tell you, karma has a way of coming back on you full circle. And when it does, it hurts. And a lot of these control freaks are feeling it now. They're starting to really come about and understand that the corruption and the theft and the ill-gotten gains and the gambling with people's well-being is going to be their downfall. And it's been for, a lot of people are going to feel that, especially, if the peasants truly get pissed. And that's what I'm waiting on, because one of these times the peasants are going to get pissed. And when they do, it never ends well for them.
Exactly. Look at the French Revolution and others. And I think that's why, the EBT cards and all those, and unemployment amount of people still getting checks on those, even though their unemployment filings may have expired. I think some of them are still getting checks. Yeah. So the one thing, the old saying used to be that politicians were afraid of the bond vigilantes. I don't think that's true anymore, because there's a lot of manipulation in the bond market. Central banks are monetizing that debt, or they have the banks with primary dealers buy it for them, and then they buy it back under the table. The one thing the politicians fear, like you said, is the people with the pitchforks. But if the people are docile sheep and they're brainwashed, and their stock prices are going up, their 401k retirement, and maybe their cryptocurrencies are doing well that they've gambled on.
Yep. Keep them comfortable.
Yep. So if people are that, they're not going to realize what's really that they're being, circled and ensnared and basically herded then towards maybe the slaughterhouse.
The boiling frog syndrome. Oh, yeah. Absolutely right, Jason.
Well, Joe, I really enjoyed this discussion. I think we could probably speak for another hour and still have fun. But if our listeners want to follow more of your work, I know you put out, is it daily videos now at the Daily Sheeple?
Yeah, Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday, I put out videos over thedailysheeple.com, and then over on YouTube, The Daily Sheeple.
And you do shorter videos. You don't interview guests yet?
Well, I mean, I can and I do. It just all depends on time. And right now, my schedule's kind of tough for guests. But yeah, I will be incorporating guests. And coming into about March time frame, I'm going to be launching a new radio type long form format with some other independent media personalities to kind of give an alternative to instead of the short stuff, to give a little more of the long stuff. So that's coming too in March.
Okay, very cool. Well, let me know if you want to have me on there to be a guest.
Absolutely, my man. You got it.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. And if our listeners want to subscribe to the Daily Sheeple YouTube channel, how do they do so?
You just go to the Daily Sheeple YouTube channel. You can subscribe there. And also, go to thedailysheeple.com, shtfplan.com. Those are our two major sites, and always have great content over there. So, and we're always doing some new and crazy stuff.
Yeah, well, keep up the good work, Joe, and we'll definitely have you back on in the near future. And I'm gonna put that Daily Sheeple logo on the thumbnail of this title. So.
Hey, awesome, man! I appreciate it.